All right, all right. Hey there, hey Brian. Um, I am, as I mentioned, I'm quite excited. Have we'll see how the whole thing turns out exactly, because of course I don't script these out. It's a little bit more like talk radio, right? Or like all the webinars. Of course, nobody scripts them. Great, Jamie. Excellent, excellent. I mentioned I think it was the second Alchemy, might have been the first, but I'm going with this Alchemy series to. What I'm shooting for is that either partway through or at the end, if you had a friend who where their situation was the only way they could possibly get the information in alchemy would be to earn $10 million and then buy it for $10 million, that you would say, absolutely, go do that, that's worth it. Go earn the 10 million and then go pay it to get these concepts. Then if that was the only way they could do it, and you would tell them, yes, do that. That's what I'm going for, at least. At the risk of sounding too cocky, I'm pretty excited about it. I think there's two concepts today that might just hit that right there, where maybe I can just drop the mic and or spend the next several months just helping make sure we have these two concepts, especially combined with what we've already covered. If we can get all that, then that'll be terrific. In general, remember, alchemy is about, in one sense, it's about foundations, but ultimately it's about the idea of mixing, and it's about giving you something that we're building together, right, in parallel with our existing model of the world and ways of doing things. We're building something that we can mix, right, with concepts and understanding, that we can mix with our thoughts, our doing, our mental model, our decisions, everything, right, the basis for everything that we do and feel, that it'll mix and keep making our lives better and making the lives of people that we affect, communicate with, better. And also that there's an additional quality I'm looking to have in what we're building, and that is that it's not subject to erosion. That once we have it, it stays, because we understand it as foundational, it's built, and then it's built from a foundation. So everything doesn't have to be the bottom layer of the foundation. We can build lots of wonderful things high up, so to speak, or on the surface, or the things that are immediately applicable and practical. But it's all it's all built on a foundation, and built. Each step of the foundation is there, and the building is there, and each is solid, and so it's not subject to erosion and so forth. So you can mix it with things, and where it itself won't be degraded as you mix it. Unlike, let's say, how people normally have their self-image, right? Or if someone has like a goal and they want to accomplish something, then each day it can sometimes get degraded, right? Some days they might get feedback that's exciting. Other days it can get degraded, right? Or your self-image itself can feel vulnerable and be degraded, right? Or you can raise your children to have certain ideas and core principles, but then they can go out into the world, and those can be sometimes degraded or reversed, or they can be led astray, or if you taught them wrong, maybe they get the right idea, right? But what we want to do is build something that again is foundationally understood and correct. Okay. Oh, you're welcome about the replay. Excellent, Alan. And I'll remember to refresh this once in a while. Normally it's updated, but sometimes it freezes. All right, let us go to the slides. Whoops, let's see if we're in the right. Whoopsies, we got ahead of ourselves there. So, all right, I mentioned something. My curse with all this stuff is that it often doesn't sound all that sexy, right? When I said, oh, we'll talk about goal flexibility, probably it wasn't getting people to cancel their plans necessarily. They might do it if they're, people have experience with me and like what I have to say in general. But actually, it's going to turn out to be pretty awesome. And if you agree, then we can let people know, and they can watch the replay and so forth. All right. And then we're going to, let me skip here two slides, and we want to also look, all right, goals. I'm not talking here about setting goals. Often when people talk about goals, we're talking about goal setting or goal achievement. But even more foundational is understanding the nature of goals, and the nature of our mind, actually, is that goals are so primary and so foundational to the rest of our mind. people don't, as far as I can tell, people, and I've worked on this, you wouldn't believe it, for literally, I talk about decades, I've explicitly been working on understanding the nature of goals. And you know how, for just simple, like, just a simple example, like, I recognized a while ago, it took me forever to figure out, to get better and better at understanding how to get this right. But you know how it will be here's the original kind of example is people would say, you might have heard me say this, but people would say to me when I was teaching accelerated learning, well, what score should I study for a test? And I would say 100, right? Like, but then they'd say, well, but if I go for 100, then if I don't reach it, then I might feel bad, and some variation of that, you know, but I don't know if I can get 100, they would say. So there's that, right, where it's like people don't want to set goals because then they can be hurt. But then there's another flip side of that. You could say there's a simplistic answer to that, which is, well, just set a goal, whatever. But then the fact is people really are hurt or frustrated or angry or demoralized if they don't get that goal. So it's not like the solution can just be, well, just set, you know, whatever goal as high as you can. Because realistically, that does actually backfire. People really do feel those feelings and get confused, or and then you even have problems of resource management. You know, do you set every goal like hugely? Do you fight every battle? If you're in school, do you set a goal to get 100 on a test in such a way that you pour all your resources into getting 100? What about all your other classes? What about the other aspects of your life, right? So part of understanding life is it's a resource management game. So it's not that simple. It's just, oh, just set every goal, you know. So it hasn't been easy, to say the least, at least for me. And I never read the answers anywhere else either. People have all sorts of interesting things to say about self-improvement, lots of good stuff out there, but answers to this and what I'm going to tell you, it just, as far as I see, it just doesn't exist. And maybe I read the wrong books, and someone just had all the answers and I didn't read it. But every time, just, I mean, and I look at plenty of stuff, they're not even in their ballpark. You know, they don't even know so many of the other foundational things, and so they can't figure this stuff out either, or they don't even address the question. Right, so do you see those issues we run into with goals? And then another issue we run into goals, where I skipped ahead to this slide, is that another thing I noticed, and again, this is one of those things that's really hard to combat and to fix, because I've talked about this, and I would make videos, and some of them that you might have seen. I had made a video years ago talking about the goal to like yourself and how you want to drop that, but in one sense it's helpful for people, but there's another way in which people weren't fully getting it, you know, because for sure, I guarantee you that nowhere's near 100%, maybe not 1%, maybe not 0.01% of the people in OMG have fully dropped the goal to like themselves, right? There's just no way. I mean, it's affecting them all the time, every day, and I see it just so, like, implicitly. It just is the case. So even though I made recordings explicitly talking about it, it wasn't helping enough. And when that's the case, instead of getting frustrated myself, of course, then I know, what do I have to do? I have to understand better, right? Like alchemy, there's alchemy in one sense involves mixing concepts together, but the other idea of alchemy I talked about in the first webinar is the idea of dissolving by looking at the ingredients, and where you're asking questions which create a space, and you actually don't ask the question. You seek understanding, which is hard to spot because you as a conscious being are doing it. Your brain doesn't actually spot it and let you know you're doing it. But what it leads to happening is questions about understanding what's good come from your brain at that point after you seek understanding as a conscious being. That in turn will create a space conceptually, and that in turn will get filled, not necessarily with the final answer you're looking for. If that was the case, it wouldn't have taken me decades to figure some of this stuff out. You know, I figured some great stuff out early on, but instead of then just working on my charisma and my presentation at that point, I've been digging and digging, and then there's more and more, and the more I get, the more it can be bridged to people, and the more I benefit from it myself, for sure. Because just because you're doing something right, I actually had I was going to say, just because you're doing something right, sometimes, let me give you the berry metaphor or illustration. This model will be with you forever once I give it to you. Just like that local peak model. Has that popped into your mind here and there? Let me know, by the way, in the Facebook group, if that local peak model has gotten you thinking a little bit and has mixed with some of your decision making, with some of your understanding of the world, right, like alchemy. Is it mixing a little bit here and there? You're thinking about it, and is it affecting some of the way that you look at things? Thank you. Oh, wonderful. Excellent. So it looks like it is. I'm going to actually keep this on the screen here, but I'm going to quickly pop back here. And where are my berries? Here we go. Here's my berries. Okay, so local peak theory we talked about. Didn't talk about driving in San Francisco yet. But we have a full schedule here, always talking about something. We've gone for almost 3 hours, right? Twice or 3 times if you count the bonus, but can't get to everything yet. That's why I'm going to double up even twice a week after June for a few months, or for 4 months. Okay, so berries. Doesn't sound too deep, but this is one of those things that's going to matter. So I'll go back here. All right, we got some great local peak stuff. Absolutely super. Simple illustration, actually. It won't take long. If you're living in the forest, hunting and gathering, or maybe just gathering, if you're eating just berries, then if there's, let's say there's several types of berries, 20 types of berries, it could be 3 types of berries, whatever. And sometimes you eat berries, and some of them are good for you, and you feel good afterward. They're healthy. They're tasty and healthy. And some of the, and let's say that all the berries they kind of look and taste similar. But ultimately, you could distinguish them if you look closely enough, or if you have the right categories and distinctions. But they generally look similar, and you're eating them, and some of them make you feel kind of sick after you eat them. If they all look the same, and before you distinguish them, then you might categorize them all just as berries, like red berries. Let's say they're all red, and let's say there's just four kinds, even 2 kinds, whatever. Then you might say, and this is a metaphor for something that comes up constantly in life. You might say, oh, berries, yeah, they fill me up. I feel okay sometimes they make me sick, and that's the way berries are, right? And that's the way it'll seem, right? That berries just sometimes make you sick, sometimes they don't, and that just is how berries are. And if someone doesn't even realize the idea that they might be distinct, and that if you made the distinction, then you can only eat the ones that you want. But then the other thing that I run into, and that you can run into, is that after you show someone how to distinguish the berries, people remember they have this kind of goal to feel smart, and what they'll feel sometimes, they'll just say, oh, I've already been doing that. I've already been eating those berries. What's the point? Of course, if it's with this berry metaphor, it's easy to see, where if you show them these berries make you sick, these don't, then generally people really would say, oh, good, that really helps. But in life, when you show someone, oh, you want to do it this way, and if then they search their memory and they have a goal to feel smart, they'll just remember the when they've done it right, and not when they've done it wrong. And sometimes people will say, like, oh, I'm a good salesman, or I'm good at this or that, and they remember the times they've done it right, don't remember the times that they've not done it well or not had success. But this will come up in your life, this idea of distinguishing, oh my goodness, how people say, oh, I always think there's a silver lining, or if you look for it, you can find a good in this situation. Well, actually, it's situations like that where you can find good. They're like the berries, where what's good is good, right? Like the bad berries weren't good. What's good is distinguishing what's good and being able to then filter out what's bad. If you're looking for the good in a compound situation, then really you're looking for distinctions. It's not that the bad stuff never is good, right? Do you see what I mean? It's the good that's good, and looking for good and seeking good is what leads to good, not the situation itself. Sorry, let me make sure if I need to add anybody here. So anyway, that's just a berry illustration. Now we'll have it at our fingertips forever. It may or may not feel profound yet, but when I think of it, or when it comes up, then I'll point it out more and more. But very often we're going to want to feel like we. Very good point. I like that. We're going to be careful with me, because it can come up often where you'll be tempted to think, oh yeah, I already knew that, or I already did that. But maybe I gave you a distinction where you did it sometimes, but now you can do it all the time. That comes up a lot with stuff that I'll show you. And it's radically different to be able to do something consistently. You screw something up half the time, or even a little bit of the time, it can really whack you. Even sometimes, some things you might do 99% of the time right, but that 1% will crush you. Or even the fear or having to realistically worry about that 1% where you might screw it up can be a problem. Okay, so very interesting. All right, great. We have we're off to the races here with the berry puns. Let's see here. So the need for feedback. I have to review the replay to see what got me started on the berries from this goal. I was talking about goals. I was talking about how people want, okay. So yeah, when I talked to you about this stuff with goals, there are times when you will have done it right, and there's times when you will have screwed it up. This is such a killer. Oh, and I was talking about self-image, and no, that was from before, how it gets mixed and so forth and eroded sometimes with feedback. So one of the things I noticed with goals, the first thing from before, from the first slide that I showed you with goals, was how we get in this quandary where we don't necessarily want to set our goals extremely high or even somewhat high because we're afraid of how we'll feel if we don't hit them. And then there's another thing that happens that's related to that, where people will miss a goal, or something will happen that people wish wasn't the case, and they don't drop the goal when it's no longer useful. They still feel that goal, and they feel the sense of failure or hurt from a goal that's still there. Even like a tragedy, any tragedy that still bothers you is an example of this, because it's like you have the goal for that tragedy not to have happened, or for that path not to have been followed, or whatever, right? But it's already happened. So the only way you could feel bad about it is if you have a goal to still achieve it, but it's already, the expiration date's passed. It's already in the past. So people have all sorts of goals for the past, and that also relates to this idea of how goal flexibility and the lack of it, and the lack of being able to count on it, right? If people could count on goal flexibility, then they could set goals right where they want and drop them as soon as they were no longer necessary, or that goal was no longer constructive, right? But people count, actually, as you go through your week, you can notice this in yourself and others. People will plan on the fact that they're not going to be fully, or even very much at all, flexible with goals in the future. So when people will worry about setting goals, and they might not phrase it in this way, but you'll see it, or they'll just worry about how their mind will make them feel if a future event happens or doesn't happen the way they hope, or a kind of disaster-ish or suboptimal thing happens. People are actually, they don't, again, phrase it this way, but you'll find in yourself and others that you can actually be afraid of how you yourself will feel, right, if something happens that's like a setback. But if you could plan on quite easily dropping or adjusting your goal based on the new situation that's a supposed setback, then you would feel differently, right? How would the world feel, right? You would say, oh, well, that's no problem if that happened. If that happens, I'll adjust my goals, and then I'll need to spend resources for the new goal. If it's a setback relative to the original goal, then certainly you might think, well, what resources would be reasonable to defend myself against that, to prevent that? But in life, again, we're often dealing with resource management, and with certain things like physical safety, you can't get it perfect, right? So it's not a matter of getting it perfect. You need to kind of do your best. Even with ranking a website, you need to judge how much. This might seem a little bit unrelated, but you need to judge how much. You can't just pour unlimited resources into trying to rank one website, right? You don't, Like if you ask Greg how many links should I send to my site, he wouldn't say, oh, an unlimited amount, just as, because we all understand that it would be poor resource management. I'm trying to figure out from my sense is that related to what I was talking about, but I'm a little bit blanking out on how to say it. It might even be fairly clear to you how it related, just not to me. But everything will tie together. So in general, the idea that that we will that we want to stop having to plan on the problem of a goal being stuck there at a time when we no longer want it. And then notice that we do that. Anytime we are thinking that we'll feel that based on a future event or a setback, then we're planning on the idea that we're not going to adjust our goal. And what I'm saying is profoundly important, right? You can probably at least start to see how much your life might be different if you didn't need to plan on goals still being there in your mind when they're doing kind of nothing but hurting you, right? Or or someone, a relationship breaks up, or even if there's a tragedy and someone passes away, then what I'll get to will be eye-opening, because what people will feel with some things, they'll say, well, David, I should feel bad about that, or something. But anyway, we'll continue. But you can see how people can be worried about that, or forget about the passing away for a moment. We'll get to that. But even just a relationship breaking up, then if you knew that you could adjust your goals based on the new situation on the fly, and you understood that goals were the basis. See, we tend to assume, without realizing it, that goals are not the actual basis for our mind. For example, with beliefs, people tend to think that their beliefs aren't just there to serve their goals, but they are, which is kind of a shocking thing. Something I'll probably delve into more in a different webinar, because I have some things I want to get to here. But it's an incredible thing to really internalize that and get what that what that really means and leads to logically, is that people's beliefs in practice are built on, your mind is built on your goals. It's not the other way. People function, act on the idea without really affirming it intellectually or anything, but they act on the idea that their beliefs are there because they're correct. All right, and then their goals, they would presume at that point, are based on the kind of the reality of the world, like their understanding of the world, which is their beliefs. But it's not that way. Beliefs are accumulated around goals. Goals are not accumulated around your model of the world. But again, people think their beliefs are there because the beliefs are true. And when you see how they're not, then the only way out is a way out that I've already helped you build, or at least indicated for you, that you can use to build, which is what? You need to get the core of your goals needs to be, there's different logically related angles on the core of your goals. One of them, of course, is the idea of you and other people being maximally happy. The other is that you do want to understand what's really true. But you're not going to be able to do that if there's other goals that are conflicting with that are competing with it. Or at least you want to do that if you understand that proper goal about you want to understand what's actually true. If you understand that clearly, then like with the alchemy idea, that can sit there and start to help you dissolve these counterproductive goals. But that's incompatible with goals for feedback and goals for your self-image, and basically people's default view of the world is incompatible with the idea of really having the goal to understand what's really true. Until and unless you get that properly, then then your beliefs will serve that, but that's okay, because now your beliefs are based on understanding what's really true, and then you won't be offended, right? And anyone that's offended by someone else's ideas, then that's an indication that their core goals aren't there properly. You can have an issue with people being aggressive towards your property, right, including your reputation if they're trashing that unjustly, or of course your body or any of the other property, money, and so forth. Okay, so, and I flash forwarded to this just to give you a glimpse, and which is, so we took a bit of a look at flexibility, and then I'll round that out, and then I'll show you how I'll help you dissolve it. And then the other thing I'm going to help you dissolve, but first I want to show you a little bit about what it's doing to you, is that what happens, and I noticed this a while ago, it took me a long time to figure out how to dissolve it, which is people start by having a goal. This is pretty easy to see with, with relationships. People will have a goal to like be dating or being married to someone that they're excited about, or however the goal works out, not being lonely or being validated, whatever. But then they want feedback. But then the goal becomes, in practice, if someone just watched their mind and their feelings and their actions and their thoughts, they would see that they had a new goal, which was a goal to have feedback that they were like attractive, or that people wanted to be in a relationship with them. Same thing if someone starts by having a goal to create a larger income. What happens is that goal morphs or gets kind of a tunnel vision. People will end up in practice losing sight of that, or having at least a competing thing where they have a goal for feedback, like the appearance that they're making progress towards that. And you might say, well, David, what's wrong with that? But if you look, it's particularly easy to see with the dating thing. It should be pretty easy to see if someone's goal shifts to feedback that they're great or attractive or desirable, then it might be easy to see that that's clearly counterproductive to the actual goal of being in a happy, effective, loving relationship with somebody, right? Like, because then, for example, if you're a guy, all the woman has to do is act like she likes you, and you go nuts, right? And you'll do anything to get validated by that person, and you'll feel like you're on drugs. I mean, you might not put it that way, right? But it's like heroin or something, where every time that they act like they like you, and then you're not really thinking about whether that person and you are a good match. You're not thinking about the relationship and building and constructing a great relationship that you want. Instead, you're just like hooked on crack with the validation and the approval, right? And then you're very easily manipulated. You're led in the wrong direction. You make bad decisions. Your resources, it feels so unbelievably important to you. And again, you basically act like a drug addict, including all the spending the money and the resources and starving the rest of your life based on it. So very counterproductive. And the same effect happens with trying to make money. If I ever hear someone say, well, I just have to see results and I need to see them quickly, then it's like the same kind of, it's as if a person was saying, I just need a girl to tell me that they like me. I need them to show me that they like me and imply that they like me and sleep with me. And then after they sleep with me, then I'm panicked again the minute I wake up the next day. And what if she doesn't like me anymore? And then she needs to do it again, and she needs to tell me how great I am. And David, do you think that's going to help me have a great relationship and get me what I want and lead to a great life, and I'll spend my resources well and have good priorities? And obviously not, right? It's horribly counterproductive. And of course, not only, it's kind of just, and of course the guy in this illustration will act in an unattractive manner, trying to get validated, right? Women aren't very attracted to a guy who just badly needs validation. They might enjoy manipulating him for a little while and not realize, and they might not realize they're doing it even. They might be getting something in return that's working for them. And I'm not picking on either gender here. I'm just picking an illustration that's easy to picture. Stereotypical illustrations are actually easier to picture, so I'll kind of generally default to this, right? But that's incredibly ineffective on so many levels, right? I named so many ways that it was screwing the guy up and leading him astray from getting to his actual goal. But isn't that incredible how the goal is to have a happy relationship, right? Be loved and so forth, and then create that has to be created and so forth. And yet it seems logical that, David, isn't feedback helpful? Like, doesn't it make perfect sense that you want to like be getting feedback towards what your goal, and then you can see whether you're making progress? Shouldn't that be a great strategy? Seems good in theory, but I'm just showing you it's horrendous in practice, right? The guy acts like a crack addict. His priorities get all screwed up. Not only his other parts of his life degenerate, which further makes him worse for a relationship partner. He's self-conscious, again, easily manipulated, basically weak and needy. It's all counterproductive. How could that be? It should be that getting feedback is a great strategy, right? It should be that getting to a goal, I've heard gurus put it this way, is like flying a plane. You just have to you just make adjustments and see if you're heading in the right direction. Actually, that doesn't work. It can work if you happen to be in a situation where feedback is clear and obvious, and you're not and undeceptive. Then sure, it could get into a goal can be great, like flying a plane. Some games are set up that way. If they're set up well, I mean, that's fun, right? It's fun it's actually fun. There's a book called Flow, which you've probably heard of, right? Mihail Csikszentmihalyi or something. Not even. Just look up the book Flow if you're interested. But anyhow, that's the author that I can't. But his conclusion is that, oh, people love flow, so you should try to get into flow, which you might believe as well. But the problem with flow is you can be flowing off a cliff or off a waterfall, right? You can be flowing down the stream happily and blammo, right? A guy who's in that situation I described feels wonderful. He's happy. He's on crack, so to speak, right? And like every day is wonderful and it's incredible, but he's heading off a cliff and never not going to get what he wants, and hurting the people he interacts with as well, probably, right? So he's hurting himself and other people in wonderful flow, feeling great on his brain's idea of crack, right? Heroin or dopamine, right, in your brain. He's being a dope, right, on dopamine. But this, what I described, is probably affecting you. Might not be as extreme as that, but probably in several places in your life. You're probably doing the exact same thing. So this feedback thing and flow thing seems so smart, except it's destructive in many cases. So we need to understand this. We need to, like the berries, right, here they come again, there's aspects of it that are nifty. Of course we all like being in flow. I like my brain to pop me with dopamine, right? I like to get an effect like I'm on drugs without taking the drugs. In the case of the guy dating, he's not actually taking drugs and he's getting the same effect, right, or better. So that part's nifty. You can get that plenty in life. But like the berries, if we can separate out the problems and the wrong ways of doing that, right, the guy's brain is giving him the high. The brain could do it anyway, but wouldn't it be nice to get that high by also being constructive rather than destructive, right? And that we're not going to get that unless we can distinguish the berries. See, I'm so glad I did the berry metaphor. I didn't even see this coming, but because I had it for you guys, or the illustration, not really a metaphor. But that lets me refer to it now from now on with you guys, which is super. I have these kind of building block illustrations like that and like the local peak thing that come up constantly. This wrong-minded understanding of feedback and how people's goals get warped into goals for feedback. And I hope you understand that's what I'm saying, is that what I noticed is that people will first have a goal, like let's do the income thing instead of the dating thing for a moment. So people will say, all right, I want to get my income up to whatever level. Either they pick a number or they pick some other way of achieving a certain success. Getting a client, getting several clients, whatever. Doesn't have to be numerical. But they'll set that. Then their brain naturally, by default, will try to break that into pieces, right? Break it down. Again, seems logical. Seems like it'd be effective. And then it's like, well, what would be, what do we want now? So it breaks it into sub-goals or pieces, and those are like and those have to be things that are obvious, right? That are like feedback from the environment. So an obvious example would be a client saying, yeah, I want to talk to you, or yeah, I want to be your client, right? So then people have a goal for that. But the problem is, again, there's good in there, like with the berries, there's some good berries. But it can be very counterproductive as well. It can have all the same problems as the guy trying to date and doing it all wrong that way. And you could be running into the same thing with trying to make money. And probably to some degree everyone's running into this. I run into this, but I'm aware of it, so when I spot it, I can dissolve it. Sometimes quickly, sometimes it takes some time to dissolve. But also, the more I'm aware of it, the more I understand it, the more I also kind of get it right early on and set myself up properly. Sometimes if you don't set goals up properly, they can bite you later. But at least then, if you know how it all worked, you can undo the problem. Like, so you can accidentally set goals wrong, just like you can get a relationship off with somebody on the wrong foot, or start even a business venture on the wrong foot with not a very clear agreement or something, or something in the agreement that's not going to work out that well. That's metaphorical or parallel to setting a goal kind of a little bit wrong for yourself without realizing it, because we don't set goals like, we don't always know when it's happening, right? Because it's a goal exists if it's in our mind, not just because we think we have one or want to have one. Sometimes they just get in there. But anyhow, sometimes they get set wrong. With enough understanding, maybe never they have to get set wrong, right? But realistically, right now, they can get set wrong. But then it's a little bit like getting into a suboptimal contract or joint venture or client relationship. And then if you understand at least what the nature of it looks like when it's right, then at least you could try to fix it after the fact. It might take a little bit of doing an effort, but that's great. So that's way better than not knowing what the problem is and how to solve it. So a lot of what you run into for some amount of time will be trying to fix goals that got set wrong. But then more and more you can also set them more right and so forth. So pretty hot, right? If we can avoid this whole problem with the feedback, then our lives can be so much more effective. However effective your life already is, much more effective. And then this flexibility thing, right, where we both are not so worried about setting our goals very high out of the box, or where we don't already have a framework, we don't know what it is yet, right, where we set goals more in faith. Plus, if we can get rid of the problem of residual goals that are just sitting there that have their time has passed, either it's a goal where it's no longer even possible to achieve it because it's in the past, or the tragedy or setback already happened, or it's no longer a constructive goal to have. Maybe there's a term that's not worth trying to rank for anymore and you want to drop it, but you feel like, man, maybe I should keep that goal. But really it might be there's something tying you to that goal that's actually not helpful, let's say. Where if you could look at it more objectively and strategically, you would drop it, but maybe you wouldn't realize that until I show you what I'm showing you here. What was my other example? There's like a person who's no longer realistic to have a relationship with, and you wish you could have a relationship with them. Maybe it's a client, or maybe it's a potential client, and you wish they would become your client, but it doesn't look like it's happening. Then that's a goal, right, to have that person as your client, or that person as your girlfriend or boyfriend or spouse. Then there might be a time when you want to drop it, but the goal just sits there, making you feel bad and frustrating you and making you feel inadequate and so forth. And with what I can show you, wouldn't it be nice to not have that either anymore and be able to just look at the situation more objectively and strategically? So these are two different issues, and I'm going to be looking at the solution to both. How's that sound? Go to the phones, go to the feedback real quick, just to continue with the energy here. Mike Long. 10 million. Thanks, Mike. Excellent. Do a little refresh. We're in the OMG Way group, and I refreshed the wrong one. What do we got here? I'm a little more fired up than usual tonight. I might not make you post in the future, but let's have some fun tonight. We'll do it. Mind, flexibility, unplug. You guys want it? You guys want these two solutions? Post it up. Excellent. Thank you. I guess I should have. I could have given a hashtag, but it's more fun when you come up with your own original statements and excitement and support. There we go. Heck yeah. All right. Red pill. I love it. Excellent. Let's do it. Right. Wow. Got a nice number of people. For me. I'm not the about 200 people. I wasn't part of the original offer for OMG, so, and I don't give people the crack that they're looking for exactly as much. But once you get hooked, then you're hooked, right? Once you start seeing it, let's do it. All right, excellent, loving it. Okay, excellent. Let us continue then. It's kind of fun. fun to do that once in a while. The reason I don't do it all the time is because of this feedback thing. I do, you'll see. But when it's for fun, it can be when it's just to keep the energy going. Not even keep it going. I don't know. Just we'll look at it when we talk about feedback. You'll see. You'll see why I don't do it all the time. But hey, it's fun for now, right? Okay. Just in case anyone was typing something and didn't get on there. Oh, a lot of people. Excellent. Well, LOI crack. Love it. Excellent. Okay. All right, here we go. This, at some point, maybe now, maybe this week, maybe later tonight, or maybe in the middle of the night, you'll wake up with it, maybe in a year. But when this really hits you, then I'll give you the place where you can send your check for $10 million bucks. Right? Excuse me. Let's see here. One quick moment. I'll be right back. All right, all good. All right, well, it's right here. Do I have to explain it, or is it just something? Okay, all right. This is understandable because of some of the other foundational stuff that I've already talked about to some degree on Alchemy. I think I've given you a decent amount of foundation, but also in some of my other recordings if you've heard them. But I'll should give you enough here that you can get it just from this. But it's the kind of thing you can only figure out, really, if you have other building blocks. And ultimately, this is just incredibly cool and profound. Okay, one of the things I've said in the past, that's correct, is that your mind twists the true idea of good. The true idea of good is only understandable if you have the distinction of your consciousness field, which is the original foundational distinction that got me started in like a whole different universe. And I've been playing and discovering in that universe for many years. And that's why I'm in a different, and now I have so much stuff to share with you. And like none of it is anywhere else. And it's not about boasting. If it was somewhere else, great. As I said before, I could just happily retire right now and love it. I love helping you guys, but I would love even more watching somebody else help you guys. You guys would be just as well off. And I could just chill and watch someone else do it. Would be, for my lazy demeanor, would be even more preferable. But it's you and me, so we do what we have to do here. All right, all of us. You put up with me, and I deliver the goods as best I can, and I can't just watch somebody else do it as much as I would like to. Anyhow, so this your consciousness field, which you can't perfectly pin down, but you know it's there, because if you did not have a consciousness field, you'd be aware of nothing whatsoever. So to whatever extent you're aware of something, and whatever that something is, that's your consciousness field. I'm talking about what you can think of as when you look outside and you see the world out there, like your computer, and I'm looking at a window and my lawn outside and some flowers and chair and all that. And you. No, I'm just kidding. To me, it's a little webcam window, right, that I have to talk to. But anyhow, you open your eyes and you see, and that's part of your consciousness field, is what you feel like is your visual experience of the world. And then there's what you hear and what you taste in your five senses, what you feel like is your sensory experience, plus what you feel like are your thoughts in your head, memories in your head, feelings in your head and body and all that. So external, internal, everything that you're experiencing, whatever that might be, when you try to pin down exactly what it is, it kind of slips through your fingers and you're not quite sure, what was I just aware of? I'm not, or what am I aware of right now? It's not nothing, and you have some sense of it for sure. And there's distinctions in there, and there's things you could see. You could be very sure that you're not seeing an elephant right now unless you are, or you're not feeling like you see an elephant. You're not experiencing that you feel an elephant. You don't seem to see an elephant. You couldn't answer that question if you had no sense of anything in your consciousness field, right? So there's things you can know. I've talked before about how you can kind of know some amount of distinctions between big, obvious things at least. Anyway, it's splitting the world conceptually into my consciousness field, whatever I'm aware of, which has to be something, whatever that is, and everything else. And starting there, rather than normally people try to build the world conceptually off of the physical world, that they imagine there's a real physical world that's kind of the basis for things, especially conceptual, and people kind of build their concepts off of that. They feel like even consciousness, they feel like their consciousness field is created by their brain, which is physical, right? And then it emerges sort of from the brain activity, is their sensory experience and visual images. And then they feel like their thoughts originate from their brain too, like in their head. And then people feel like consciousness sort of is there, or they might think they're trying to become more conscious. You can understand more of what's good or whatever, but you can't become more conscious. You just are conscious of your consciousness field. So, and goodness resides in your consciousness field. It doesn't reside out there. The reasons why you feel good or feel bad or neutral, or why you have more good or less good, or more bad or less bad, the reasons reside out there somehow, somewhere. And we can understand those reasons better, which is great. We want to seek understanding of the reasons why good or bad or more good or less, and more bad or less bad, more good and less good. We want to understand more about the reasons. That's what I mean by seeking understanding. Why the good is coming, the bad is coming, more good, less good. So good, though, resides in our consciousness field. Your mind is not conscious. It's not aware at all. Your mind is a mechanism, right? It's not. It doesn't have any experience. We anthropomorphize, which means we project consciousness and like humanity, sort of, or kind of pseudo-conscious or pseudo-humanity, onto our own mind, onto other people's bodies and their minds. See, think of a person you know, or anyone, or just a random kind of person that you picture. The way people look at the world is that person is conscious, like that body and that mind is conscious. That's not the case. What there is a conscious being, presumably, who has a conscious experience, and who has a mind and a body as like a resource or a mechanism that's related to their situation and so forth. But it's not that their mind and body is conscious. They're just a being that is conscious, and that you can get that or not. But what's interesting is how we anthropomorphize. We project humanity or pseudo-humanity onto things that are clearly not human, such as a brain or mind. This is easier to see with like your car. And there's psychological experiments. This is pretty funny. When cars act up, or you can simulate this with other things besides cars, but when machines act up and look like they're kind of acting random or in an unexpected way, which is usually not what people want, then people actually treat them as more human than if they act in a predictable manner that they wanted to. People are, and there's experiments, I don't have them in my fingertips to read to you or anything or describe, but we anthropomorphize machines sometimes to some degree, right? We anthropomorphize animals to a certain degree, and I mentioned in the bonus webinar about God's existence and related topics yesterday, how one terribly destructive thing people did that leads to unbelievable pain and suffering in the world and terrible decisions in all kinds of ways is people anthropomorphize groups of people, right? Like the example of you anthropomorphize the Japanese, and all of a sudden it's fine to incinerate young children in front of their parents, and their parents too, because the Japanese did something to America, which is also anthropomorphized, rather than seeing people as individuals and trying to fight against individuals that are being aggressors is one thing. But just trying, it's easier to anthropomorphize. Our brain does that, it anthropomorphizes things. That whole was just to give you a little bit of a lattice work, a little bit of context to this idea that might have gotten your mind racing there a little bit by accident, but if we can just get this distinction, it'll be unbelievably helpful for us. So I wanted to give you some context. So good resides in your consciousness field. The reasons for good are involved with reasons, but what your brain isn't conscious. So when it tries to process concepts, what I'm about to say is ultimately extremely profound, whether or not it hits you right this moment or not. And I've said it before. but it may or may not have been in a place that you've heard. Your brain, and I kind of just said it, but I'm just going to repeat it clearly. Your brain is not conscious. There are certain concepts that are inherently involve your consciousness field. Goodness, good, is one of those concepts. And pretty much anything related to good and anything related to knowing also. Knowing is, the foothold for knowing resides in your consciousness field. You don't know everything in your consciousness field exactly, but you know you know certain distinctions within it that are kind of big and clear and so forth. So your foothold for knowing and goodness are inherently concepts that can't be understood whatsoever. They're nonsense. If you remove the idea of consciousness or consciousness field from those concepts and you try to process them in a way where you try to unmix out the consciousness or consciousness field from them, you're left with nothing. You're left with nonsense. You can't do it because it's an inherent part of the definition. It'd be like trying to remove the idea of like a human from the idea of a spouse, right? Like imagine being married to a person, but they're not a human, and maybe you could do it by imagining being married to an alien, but in real life, it would be kind of impossible. Just kind of with the illustration on the fly there. So however good that metaphor is, you can kind of get a sense. Anyway, so what now? The profound thing, that's half of it, but the other half of what's profound is your brain, in order to process these things and store them, has to twist the concept of goodness and of knowing. These slightly important concepts, right? Knowing and goodness. In every case, always, your brain has to twist them. So there's no consciousness left in them. But there's no, it's like dehydrated milk, except for, like, it's not milk, right? Now, you can kind of add the water back in. You can think about goodness and about knowing and knowledge, but to do so, you have to, like, mix the consciousness back in. So it's kind of proud of myself here with the dehydrated milk metaphor. So it's like dehydrated milk, but dehydrated milk isn't like milk. If you define milk as a liquid, then dehydrated milk isn't milk at all. And until and unless you add the liquid back in, it's not milk. It's just a precursor, or it's something you mix with liquid to get milk. So what your brain can store is something you can mix your consciousness with. You need to mix the important elements back in to, and you can think about goodness. But whenever you're thinking about goodness accurately, it has to involve sorry. I had an itch on my nose, and that distracted me, and I got me. So I'll just scratch my itch real quick, and there we go. And I was saying, when you have to, if each and every time you don't mix goodness with or knowledge, you don't mix the conscious part of it back in. Each and every time you'll screw it, the result will be screwed up. So you need to always do it. Just like you can't like mix water with dried milk, dehydrated milk, once, and then forevermore in the future, whenever you have dehydrated milk, you can't just pour it in your cereal as if it's liquid. You have to mix a liquid with it each and every time anew. I don't mean if you mix liquid in one cup, that cup will always have liquid. But I mean if you take new dehydrated milk that's powder, and then you need to mix liquid with it again in order to have a liquid milk. And it's not like you can do it on Tuesday and drink it, and then on Wednesday have some powdered milk and think that it already has liquid in it. And that's a very easy mistake to make, is, oh, yesterday I got it straight with goodness and knowing, therefore my brain has it straight today. My brain just knows it. Your brain never, ever, ever, ever will be able to store the correct idea of goodness or the correct idea of knowing and knowledge, ever. Each and every time you need to mix consciousness into it. What you can store is a red flag, like, hey, this is powdered milk. Hey, this is just a precursor to understanding goodness. And then you stop and think about goodness as it relates to the conscious experience of goodness, and then you get it right. And you need to always do that. There's never a way out of that. You have to add it, just like there's no way to, one time mix a cup of liquid with dehydrated milk and forevermore have gallons of milk that's liquid. Okay, so that right there, a number of profound ideas, but they're all related. All right, so but I don't want to treat this halfway because this could be so incredibly beneficial for you if you get this right. But it's easy to kind of get twisted because we're dealing with concepts that your brain immediately twists or dehydrates, so to speak. All right. So your brain twists the idea of goodness. Specifically, your brain twists the idea of good into the following. That which helps you or it. It twists the idea of you into itself, by the way, because you can't understand you. So I mentioned goodness and knowing. You are defined, properly defined, in relation to your consciousness field. You are that which is aware of your consciousness field. However, to store the idea of you, your brain isn't conscious, has no ability to process the idea of consciousness, and so it has to twist out the idea of consciousness out of you, which is a problem. So you need to store the idea of you with a red flag also. And you can't understand who you are unless you stop and reflect on the idea that you're conscious. Imagine what it would be like not to be conscious, realize you can't even imagine that. That isn't the case. You are conscious, that's you. Each and every time you have to do that. Each and every time you don't do that, you, as processed by your brain, will be something else. Will be some image or your brain or your body or whatever, right? By default, it keeps identifying you with your body and brain. One moment. All right, gave my nose a good scratch there. Hopefully that'll take care of it for a little while. Let's see here. Go one here now. Where's this coming from? I think in some cultures it means you're about to come into money. In other cultures I think it maybe means you have to take a shower, but I did take a shower earlier. So, all right. So your brain twists goodness into that which furthers its goals. It'll twist you into it, and so it'll make it feel to you like that which helps you further your goals. But you don't have goals directly. Your mind or your brain has goals as the basis for everything that it does. It's like it is a goal-achieving mechanism. It's basically what it does. So it can't even get to square one without a goal. Everything is built off of its goals. Even think about this. You're aware of it. Actually, your brain is taking in all sorts of information all the time, right? We know that, getting zillions of inputs. So how does it decide what's important? What to pay attention to? Well, obviously, what is important, and why is something important? Because your brain calculates that it's most relevant to achieving its goals. You see? So, and then you build from there. It goes from there. So, and then, then there's actions you're choosing from. Which actions does it tell you to take? That which furthers its goals. Very profound as you see it more and more. So your brain has this idea of goals where goodness is that which helps it, which it thinks is you, further goals. So things are good because you have a goal. Now this can now allow us, if we're to the extent that we see that, either you see it now or you'll work on it and see it even better. But I think we have some inkling of it to some degree at this point. Now, and best to go on anyway, that gives us more context by proceeding. If we stop and define good as that which helps us further our goals, which we're used to doing anyway by default, because that's what our brain does. But where does that lead us? That means that we should achieve our goals. And there's an inherent permanence to that. If I want somebody to like me, then I feel like it's good if I achieve that goal. So I feel like I should achieve that goal. And when you do that, it doesn't feel like the should doesn't just go away because the goal is harder in the past. You see, so if I were to say someone who had a death of someone they care about, it's in the past, let go of the goal, they would actually generally respond no, I should feel bad about it. It would be good if that person were alive. And it should be the case. And so they literally still have a goal for that person to be alive. But goodness doesn't reside outside of our consciousness field. If a goal for wanting someone to be alive is making you feel bad, if it's making you feel great, then super. But if it's making you feel bad, normally people have a mixed feeling about it. They're feeling bad and they're feeling kind of good about themselves. They're feeling good about themselves for feeling bad. People will say to me, I'll say to people, and you might have heard me say this, even in my introductory video here and there, I could say this. I say that people think that there's such a thing as that sometimes there should be bad, like things should be bad, or they should feel bad. Sometimes people say to me, when I say, no, by logic, we should only feel good. People will say, but what about people who are happy or feeling bad? Well, this is what's going on, is it's scratching the itch of or feeding into their self-image. Their self-image is, I'm a person that cares, a person, and then their definition of someone who cares feels bad about someone who's dead. And so, but at the same time, they actually feel bad. And they literally, in order to prop up their own self-image, then they feel bad about a person passing away. That feels very right. And then I've talked about triangulation, at least yesterday. It's reinforced by other people. They see other people doing it. It feels right. It fits into their worldview. And it just seems so right from so many angles. But it isn't right because good resides in your consciousness field. You should only feel good. It's like berries. Get what's good out of it. You can certainly say if there was something I could do to make that person alive, if that was better for them, and then I would do it. So you can believe that, right? But that's okay. That doesn't, right? So you find distinctions that'll work, all right? If I could still do something, I would. Leave it at that. If it would be better for that person, for them to be alive and I could do something. But clearly a goal for something that you can't control, and certainly you can't control something that's already in the past, it's already done and happened, and you want the past to be different, that's pretty obviously outside of your control. Each and any time you have a goal for something you can't control, then clearly that is a goal that should be dropped. Why don't people drop goals that are clearly outside of their control? People are constantly, all the time, they have goals, and sometimes the goal is fully out of your control, such as if it's in the past already, if the deadline's passed. But what's usually the case is people will have goals where part of achieving that goal is under their control and part isn't. But remember, one of the core idea of law of implication is focus on what you can know and build from there. A corollary to that is focus on what you can actually control and build from there. Like the berries, if there's a goal you want to achieve and there's part of the situation you can control and part you can't, then you need to distinguish that and operate only on the part you can control. This is actually another angle on what I said in the first and second, especially the second webinar, about building out the foundation. This is how I know that, or this is one way I know it and understand it. And when I gave the illustration of working, if you want a certain type of fruit, then you plant the right seed and you tend to that seed in various ways. But you don't just sit there wanting the fruit some other way. If you want the fruit faster, all you can do is tend to it better. What are you doing? You're focusing on what you can know, which is logically related to what you can control. Normally, again, people have a goal for a compound situation, a complex situation, like multiple berries, and they want to achieve the goal. Instead, think of that goal like fruit you want to grow. Understand you need to identify the fruit you want to grow. You need to identify it, okay? But then you tend to what you can know and understand and control. And as you seek understanding, that will grow, right? The amount you can know and therefore that you can control will grow if you seek what you can actually know properly. The more you focus on things you can't control it shrinks what you know, in essence, at least what you're focused on. Your focus, the amount of focus that's on what you know and can control necessarily has to be reduced, right, when you focus on aspects that you can't control. Plus, you'll feel bad, you'll feel tension in your shoulders, wherever else. You can be frustrated, you can lash out at other people. That frustration that you feel can get mixed with other issues in your life, other goals, other interactions with people, cause ripple effects, hurt other people, make things less efficient, right? So let's stick with this main thread here of what I'm talking about with good because of a goal. So let's imagine you want a certain fruit, right? Back to and going to this plant illustration. You want the fruit. Let's go to the bottom part of the slide here and include it. The only reason you would want the fruit is if the fruit will lead to goodness as conscious experience, right? A conscious experience of goodness. That's why it's a goal. Your goal should be in service of what is good. What will happen automatically without you seeing it, again, by default, is the opposite, which leads to all sorts of problems. Now, so let me continue this. So suppose you set a goal to have a certain fruit because it can lead to goodness. Because it can lead to goodness, and you set it right, and you're aware that the only reason you have that goal is because you're stipulating, not assuming that if you have that fruit, you'll have goodness in your conscious experience. Well, a couple things. First of all, there's other ways to get goodness. So these sort of mid-range goals, like these sort of symptomatic goals, there's an overall goal to maximize happiness or goodness for yourself and for everyone else. That doesn't have to go anywhere. That's a foundational, and it won't ever have to be changed. You don't have to worry about that. That goal is inherently good. There's logic-related goals that I pointed out to you, such as to understand the method of how to know what's true and then to use that method. All right, that's logic-related to maximizing goodness for yourself and others. So as you build, that's like building on a foundation. You'll build more and more logically related things. What I'm talking about here, understanding this. You can have a goal to set goals based on the idea that the goal is to serve good rather than good kind of serving a goal. Or I'll keep kind of putting it in different ways and to help it click. So with the fruit, if I stick with this illustration, it'll make it pretty easy to see. If there comes a time when the fruit's clearly not going to grow in your garden that year, then don't you drop it, right? If your brain accidentally got the idea that it's good for the fruit to grow because you have a goal, and now it gets twisted, and now the fruit itself is what's good. And again, your brain decided it was good. Why? Because you had a goal. Your brain reframes the whole thing. The fruit itself is good. Now how are we supposed to drop the goal? Because now it's like you should have that fruit, or you should have that woman, right? Or you should have someone do something you want them to do. People have goals for what other people are supposed to do, and they're inflexible about them. And as soon as it's no longer useful, do people drop them properly? No. They sit there telling themselves over and over, that person should do this, they should do this, they should. Why should they? Apparently because not the person that should do it, but the person talking has a goal or had a goal at some point for that person to act in a certain way. The brain twisted things or encoded things. Oh, now it's good if the person does that thing. Well, if it's good, it's just good. It's inherently permanent implicitly. And this is an error, but what's not an error is for me to tell you that your brain encodes it as permanent. Because if something is good, your brain is like, it's good. Well, it's permanent. It's always good, right? It's not like good temporarily. So no matter what goes on, it's good for that person to perform this action. That's how your brain got it. That's terribly destructive because now we're sitting there feeling frustrated, angry. If the person's either doing it kind of unintentionally or angry, then we're frustrated. If the person seems to on purpose not be doing what we want, then we might feel angry at that person. We feel out of control, we feel helpless, all that stuff. all because we might have set a goal for the right reasons, but it got set wrong, and your brain, as always, decided, well, achieving or furthering my goal is good. That's what's good. So now what does that look like? It looks like a person doing an action that I want, and that action is now good, and then your brain also decides that the opposite of good is bad, which isn't really true. The absence of good is just the absence of good. And clearly it's not inherently bad if another person just doesn't do what you want, right? Couldn't you feel happy for whatever other reasons, whether or not someone does a particular thing or not? Couldn't you find some other way to be happy? And as a matter of fact, if you sit there feeling angry and frustrated and helpless and maybe guilty and ashamed and all kinds of stuff because the other person doesn't do what your goal was for them to do, is that good? Of course not, when we see things properly, right? When we understand that goals are to serve good, goals are to achieve good, not goodness is not the achieving of goals. Goals are there to achieve good, to have good in your consciousness field. The minute a goal is no longer doing that, or the resources that you have in a limited supply, you might ultimately have unlimited resources over time or not, but at any moment, right, your resources are defined. And you might be able to have it more good doing something else, and for sure you shouldn't feel bad ever, period. I don't even have to complete the sentence, but you shouldn't feel bad, period. But then, in other words, it is good to not feel bad. Now, another thing people have stacked onto this as another error in their mind is that if something isn't as it should be, then they're supposed to feel angry, frustrated, guilty, ashamed. If they're stuck in a situation where they can't pursue any goals, they'll feel bored. Once I realized that, I never felt bored again. I just didn't mix those ingredients together. I didn't stick myself in a situation where I couldn't work on any goals. I'll have a book or a notebook with me, and even without that, I can just think about things in my head, right, that I'm working on for people. Alchemy, right? You figure out the ingredients, you can add them up to what you want, and you can dissolve the things you don't want. So there we have it. What I said contains the ideas. So you want, when you do set goals, set them in a way that you're stipulating. Stipulating means is fundamentally different than assuming. You're not assuming, there's plenty of times I might have an idea that I want someone to perform some action, right? I want the coaches to do webinars, right, let's say. Or maybe I think of an idea for a module that a coach might do. Or I want you guys to come on a webinar, right, and learn, and I want you to understand this stuff. But am I going to be frustrated by how many people come on a webinar? Or if people don't understand right away? No, because I don't set my goal that way. I stipulate that I want to have people show up on a webinar, so I'll perform actions to make that happen within reason, some actions. I'm not really that concerned at this point with that for other reasons. But I'll do something, right? I'll do at least spend some minimal amount of resources to help get people on webinars, or a decent amount, however you put it. I want to think of it, depending on the situation. But I can stipulate, okay, I'd like to get people on a webinar. It's a moderate priority. I'll put some resources into it, and because it can be good for people, it can lead to goodness if people understand these ideas. And then once the webinar starts, or once I'm done doing, in a situation, once I no longer am in a position to perform actions or get people on the webinar, is the goal useful anymore? Not at all, right? At this point, I can't get people on the webinar. I can maybe try to keep people on the webinar. But even if I'm worried about that, this will get to the feedback thing. If I'm sitting here thinking about keeping you on the webinar right now, probably backfire, just like the guy thinking about whether his hair is in place while he is, trying to date a girl, right, or trying to get a girl to like him or whatever, or try to create a great relationship with somebody. Then it's going to basically backfire if I'm going to try to do that, especially for this type of topics. And then I'll be on some level kind of afraid, right, because you guys can now get in the way of me and my goal. If my goal is for you to stay on the webinar, then you can prevent that goal. And then I can feel like you can hurt me, right? Like impede my progress toward a goal. And that would be a problem. Now I'd be afraid of my audience, which could be a problem. It might cause me to hold back in some ways that wouldn't be helpful. And I'm not saying I did that perfectly, but at least I recognize what I'm telling you because I'm telling it to you. And so to some extent I do it, or to a greater or lesser extent. And then if I screw it up, then I can understand what happened and I can try to unscrew it up, right? So you make a goal because you suppose, you believe as if, or you know. If you absolutely know, then you absolutely know. If you can prove it or understand it foundationally, then great. Then it'll end up being permanent unless your knowing is shown to be wrong. Even if you know something permanently and perfectly, I'm not even saying it could be wrong. Maybe it can't possibly be wrong, but at least you can, if someone, there's no risk. If it can't possibly be wrong, then no one will show you how your reasoning or your foundation is wrong. But just in case, if someone were to show it to you, then you can still drop it. But until and unless that happens, if you know for sure something's good, then you can you can stipulate, at least in as much as someone or myself is unable to recognize how my foundation is built with an error or something, then I'll have that goal. But the bottom line is, a lot of the time, most all of our goals in practice are temporary, right? And they're not like ultimate based on foundational stuff we know, right? If you're trying to rank a website, you're trying to talk to a client, trying to make some money this month, trying to get your kids to do something, whatever it might be, right? Trying to have fun tonight, trying to, whatever. Then a lot of those are kind of, what was the word I had for a second? Provisionary, if you want to use a big word. But basically they're kind of like strategic goals or presumably temporary goals, right? And kind of practical or day-to-day goals. With those, you just stipulate, okay, with the best understanding I have right now, I'm going to believe as if it would be good to achieve that goal. And then if that ever changes based on new information, fact that the conditions on the ground changing, then I can get rid of that stipulation. It's just based on the previous, or my knowledge and my understanding at the time. If that changes or if the situation changes, then I can the goal can go away. If that is my new calculation. Of course, the situation might change. You might keep the goal, right? But so if you set goals properly that way, then you'll find that you can set even higher goals without worry, and then but more importantly, you can drop them, because what they'll do is they'll burn resources. When you have these residual goals sitting around, not only do they make you feel bad, that's one thing, but they'll burn real resources. Excuse me. They'll burn your focus. They'll burn your mind. Your mind is a mechanism, right? Your brain and so forth, and it works on stuff, right? And it processes subconsciously, right? That you're not aware of. And it'll spit things into your consciousness from that, but it's doing all this processing. It's a whole awesome mechanism. And if it has these residual goals stuck in it that are no longer helpful, it's like muscles pulling in the wrong direction. And it's making your brain work inefficiently towards the goals that you actually want to have. So it's clutter. So you have all this clutter, and you probably have a lot of it. And what's one of the big one, the huge one, and then I'll almost devote like a separate webinar to this, but the whole self-image thing based on the helplessness and the defense against the defense that I've talked about. So many of our goals are there to reinforce our self-image. All right, I've been going for a bit, but, or kind of a while, but I will still nevertheless get to the feedback thing. Maybe we will not take a short break, but we'll just kind of talk to each other for a second here. And just to let ourselves kind of have a moment where I just obviously whacked you with some profound stuff there. David, we need you. Don't go. Don't shift. LOI. Thanks for taking one for the team. Did I say that? Drive the roles. Brilliance is tough to delegate. Thank you. I love your sense of humor. Excellent. We need a sense of humor when our nose starts itching while we're talking, and then distracts us. Right? Start thinking, okay, I won't think about my nose, or should I itch my nose? And that'll mess with my deep thoughts. So consciousness field could be any instance of consciousness interacting with reason or awareness. I wouldn't even overcomplicate it that way. Your consciousness field is whatever you're aware of. It's just the opposite of not being aware of something. Whatever you as a conscious being is aware of. It has nothing to do with what your brain's aware of. Your brain literally is not aware of anything. Your brain gets inputs from the environment, light waves, particles, forces, however you want to imagine that. that model of the world. Your brain gets inputs, but your brain's not conscious at all. You as a being are conscious. That's a major shift, so it's not necessarily going to, I don't know. Well, it'll never sink into your brain, by the way. You just have to kind of, one way or the other, get the dried milk part of it in your brain and then mix consciousness with it to understand your consciousness field. But you don't have to try to pin it down. Just keep it simple, just what you're aware of. Could an ant have consciousness field, or is it too below the threshold to be self-aware? By asking a question like, is it below the threshold, you're accidentally, probably, doing something where you're building consciousness off of the physical world, like off of a brain, as if the brain is making consciousness. Your brain doesn't make your consciousness field. Your brain is a model or an idea that's part of the reason why God makes your consciousness field. And I talked about God in the bonus webinar. But God actually makes your consciousness field, not your brain. Your brain serves as part of the reason why you're conscious of what you're conscious of and not something else, including it stores up stuff, right? Stuff from your whole life, and then plus you can modify it in a good way by seeking understanding, and then that leads it to ask better questions, which opens up a space which leads to better answers and building blocks. So I don't really think about, is an ant self-aware? Conscious beings are self-aware, one way or the other. If there's a conscious being there, then it would be aware. But presumably an ant is not conscious. But that would take us too far afield to talk about that right now. Doesn't mean I won't get to it over time. My mind is going bonkers trying to follow, but I like it exactly. It's where we talked about local peaks. I'm taking some of you, if you're not already there, to a different mountain. But when you get there, it's going to be super duper. I probably something clicked, right, when I was talking about that illustration with the guy trying to date and how he was acting. But you could see how when you're trying to make money, or lots of places, that you do at least that in a lesser degree. I kind of exaggerated it maybe somewhat, or maybe not, right? But pretty vivid there, right? Goals for changing past. Please expand on this. My goal to change how I'm remembering past childhood assaults, or how I frame it now. You're saying this won't work. How to handle them so healing will work. Where you want to get to is to understand that you don't want to have a goal for things to have been different anymore. If you were to go into the past, and if you were to have some control over the result, then it would be appropriate for sure to have a goal not to be abused, right? But it might have been fully out of your control even then, in which case it never would. Logically, it can't be helpful to have a goal outside of something you can control. But you don't need the goal for it anymore. You can have a memory, and the only thing, anything like in your mind or anywhere else, the only purpose of it is goodness. The only purpose of anything is goodness. Badness just comes from contradictions that are blocking things. But sorry, the abuse event did not have the purpose of goodness. The abuse event came from someone acting on a contradiction. But the only thing that now, the only way that you would ever want to use a resource now is what I'm trying to say. The only point of a resource, this is my better way to put it. The only point of any resource for you, from your perspective, is to use it, either not use it or to use it for good. So at this point, your memories, the only use of your memories at this point is to have more goodness. So you can at least think about that, and I'll see what I can do to develop things like that more. And that's why I have time with you guys to develop these things. And in practice, certainly this is on the right track for sure. Excellent. I'm glad that hit you. Good resides in your consciousness. That's right. Your consciousness field. I mean, I'm not telling you what terminology to use, but I just want you to be careful. The word consciousness is used in all sorts of ways that aren't built off of the right understanding of the world. And again, think of the idea of being more conscious. That's coming from the assumption that there's the physical world and then consciousness kind of arises from that and we want more of it because it's good. Consciousness does not arise from the physical world. Consciousness, you start with the idea of a consciousness field. That's so you understand that you exist. Yeah. And then the reasons for what's inside of your consciousness field, or what you experience in your consciousness field at any moment, reside in the world of reasons, which includes the physical world and so forth. Right, that's correct. Now what I'm doing here is giving you the deep foundation to be able to really accomplish. I'm giving you the ingredients, the core basic ingredients, or at least attempting to, and I don't mean attempting to just because if you don't understand, me myself, I'm trying to make sure I have the ingredients straight. Maybe I can get the ingredients even more granular, and I'm looking to do that. So I'm working on this myself, but at least maybe I have them at this point broken down well enough that you can apply it pretty well and benefit them, and I can too. Right? So it's one thing for someone to give you a conclusion that's correct, but what I'm trying to, but I mean, I could say don't be angry, don't be frustrated, but that only has limited use unless I can show you the ingredients and break them down for you. You see? And that's, again, what alchemy is about, is doing that. And that's what I do when I say I work on this hours a day for the last few months and for decades. Specifically, though, for, on this alchemy that I'm presenting now, I've been working on for months, on top of everything I've worked on for decades. But that's what I'm doing. I'm using alchemy on concepts. I'm looking to break them into pieces, combine them, and so forth. And it's a real activity. It's not just sitting there free associating and thinking and daydreaming and saying, oh yeah, I'm working. Or even writing stuff in a notebook. I'm not just writing down the impressions my mind gives me. I'm not just even doing that. I'm, again, intentionally having to mix them in my mind and add and subtract and so forth, modify. And that's what I'm doing. And I do that for hours, basically. And it's generally, I think it's something that you probably have to build up to where you build the right framework for your mind to stick to doing that. And otherwise, it's going to kick up a fuss at first until you get the right framework. Anthropomorphication. There's always an option. Wow, just wow, my goals are going to be so much more effective now. Alrighty, excellent, Jen. Rock and roll. See, 10 million bucks. We're going for 10 million. So I'm shooting, why was I able to, set my goal that high? Although that might be low now. I think I'm going to hit 10 million twice on this one webinar if I keep going. I don't know how I go for 3 hours every time. I never mean to, but I've got to say what I'm going to say here. You'd think I would drip it out better so I could pace myself, but we got more to come. We'll keep going. Yep, psycho-cybernetics, absolutely. Very helpful. And then once again, I'm going to be giving you ingredients that are more granular than you're generally going to find in self-improvement books. What they'll do is they'll do more like observation and science and testing, or just observation and charisma. They make an observation, they feel like it's useful, and it basically is. They'll kind of, what generally self-improvement gurus do, and I'm not criticizing this, I'm just identifying it, is they come up with models, and those models fit and work, or they don't, but often they do. Often they work at least better than what the default, or sometimes they work very well. And then they just test if that model works, or they just try to confirm it. They have confirmation bias, and they try to believe it themselves really strongly, then that makes them more magnetic, and then they sell it, and so forth. But often they're useful, but please don't confuse giving you a model with giving you alchemizing and really getting to the granular foundation of it so you can mix and dissolve for yourself. And that's what I'm trying to do here. The only reason, it's not that I need credit for it or a pat on the back. I don't mind those things, especially as it helps get other people involved and learn this and encourages them. But the real thing is you yourself won't benefit. The reason I keep repeating about how this is unique, unless it isn't, but if it is, then you need to know understand it's unique in order to benefit properly from it. If you're projecting or conflating with other stuff, then you won't get the proper benefit that I'm trying to give you. And I don't want you to miss out on that. And I work a lot in order to give you the ingredients rather than just give you a model that works. It's funny because you give people a model that works and there's more reward, there's more immediate feedback to it, right? People love that when you just give them a model that works. It's harder, a lot more work, and not as rewarding on the surface, and it's not as immediately rewarding in general to do what I'm doing, but we have to do it. 10 million in debt, well, that's great. Thank you. Thank you so much. How would I apply this to overcoming addictions? I'll just kind of give you a few general things of focus on the foundation, focus on what you know, and what you can control, and work on the context. A little less, get yourself in situations where that'll trigger the addiction. I could say totally avoid those situations, but maybe you're not able to do that right now. Maybe it's outside of your control to totally avoid situations that will trigger the addiction. If that's the case, sort the berries. Say, all right, what do I know? What can I control? All right, what I can maybe do is not get in my car and go to this particular place that really triggers it, and I'll see how that works. And I'll pick, what I can also do is picture, and sometimes my brain will get stuck. My brain will just go to the point where I go to like a bar, right, just to be stereotypical and simple, where I go to a bar and then I feel like drinking, and then I feel like, oh, that's awesome. And then my brain's like, yeah, it gives me that picture of me drinking, and I'm sipping that drink, and I feel good. It's a metaphor that's parallel to the fear thing that I talked about. In this case, your brain isn't getting stuck at fear. It's getting stuck at that pop of addiction, of feedback, of the pleasure, right? If you carry it through past where it's getting stuck with the addiction thing, so you think, all right, I drink, and you can do this if you're doing what I was describing with dating as well. If you think, okay, she has sex with me, she tells me I'm amazing and gives me that smile and has sex with me, keep thinking it through. All right, well, wait a second. Then what do I want? Then how am I going to feel after that? Oh, well, especially the next day, I'm going to wake up and need it all over again. I'm going to be on a treadmill, and I'm going to be in a panic, maybe even more so, because now I'm going to care even more about her validation because she knows what it's like to have sex with me. And when you think it through that way, past just that moment, so addictions really get reinforced by, again, the same way as fear, stuck on that awesome moment, carried all the way through to all the costs and the problems and how, and then I'm not saying that in and of itself will dissolve it, but it very well might, and it'll certainly be effective because now you're focused on something you can know. And the more you mix that you know, it'll start to erode the context of the addiction and then the addiction itself. That was pretty cool. Didn't know I knew all that until I asked, or I didn't know I could know all that. I'm so glad you're doing this for us. We're fortunate to be sharing this with you. Thank you so much. Step by step, more clarity. Right, and I see what you're saying there. You mean that as I continue, more clarity reveals itself. Exactly, and that's why I'll keep continuing. And notice how I would feel if I needed the feedback that you guys were getting it, which I'll get to. I'll get to the feedback thing. I might treat it fairly quickly and then continue with it over time, this second part here. But think about that, right? And I'm even getting to the second part now. What if I needed to hear from you? What if I had a goal? So what if I set a goal where I want people to get it? That's reasonable, right? That's a reasonable goal. But then what if I let my brain do its normal twisting by default, and now my brain defines good in terms of feedback, like it tries to make a bite-sized piece. So what's a bite-sized piece of you getting it? Or it'll end up being an appearance-based thing. That's feedback that looks a certain way. So what if I want people to just hashtag, yeah, man, I got it, right? Then that would actually be very counterproductive, and I'd be just a lot like, metaphorically, like that guy doing the dating wrong. And now I would feel like it's good if I just hear that people got it. That's going to make me want to feel, maintain blurriness. I'm going to want to feel like I got it too. This is what happens to gurus, is they need to feel like they got it, like their model is it. And they don't want to dig, because if they dig, they might find that they didn't have it yet, and they might experience not knowing and uncertainty. And that makes it harder to sell their stuff. It makes it harder to get that feedback from other people that they got it and that they're certain. Because if I'm certain, if I come across like I got it, then it's going to make you feel more like you got it, and you can use the false feeling of getting it. I said it for fun, of getting it, which is that it fits, that it's triangulated. And again, I'll develop that more in different webinars, but I've discussed it. But where there's no foundation, there's like a whole bunch of legs to the table, and those legs might even be on like some boards, but then there's nothing underneath that. But if there's 3 or 4 of them, then you feel like, oh yeah, now that's a foundation, I got it. That's how our brain feels. As long as there's 3 or 4 legs or more that look good, then it's like, okay, that's foundational, that's true. but it doesn't look underneath that. And it'll actually motivate you to not look. Because if you look, you might feel uncertain. That would reinforce helplessness and so forth. So you see this terrible goal for feedback, and and you can notice I'm actually not doing it. And over time, that's critical. Because it would be really normal, wouldn't it, for me to be on here right now being like, you guys got it, tell me you got it. And I'm not doing that. I'm doing quite the opposite in a sense. You see? Oh, that's absolutely right. Anytime you feel bad, you can know for sure there's a contradiction to be dissolved. You might not find it for 10 years or 20, but maybe you'll find it on the next webinar. Who knows? Or maybe, of course, you'll figure it out for yourself with the building blocks. That's, again, the more foundational building blocks you have and things built off of that, the faster it is to figure things out. You might get to the point like me where I can figure a lot of things out correctly really fast, not because I'm just smart, or not because I'm smart at all necessarily, but because I have all these building blocks, so I just quickly can, it doesn't take long to just build, if you built so much of the way already, then you can quickly build the rest real fast. Someone else would have to spend the other 20 years figuring out the building blocks, but if I've done that, it looks like I'm, figuring things out quickly. It's a good illusion, all right. So, okay, let's do this slide, and then we will be done with this webinar. Not that that's a good thing. We don't want to be done, do we? We want to keep going forever. All right. Here's what I really mean when I say I'm here to win. All right. Listen. This is so cool. All right. You want to stop living and thinking as if you haven't already won. And you also want to start going after things. So think about this. If it were the case that you knew that you were going to win, that you were going to succeed in some way regarding a goal, for sure, then would you need feedback? Not exactly. You wouldn't need feedback to feel good. And let me illustrate that. Back to the plant. If I can do activities that I somehow otherwise, know will definitely be helpful, then even if there's no appearance attached to them, then and if I know I'm going to and then if I know I'm going to win, then I can feel excited and encouraged and be in flow actually the whole time. You see, what we want to switch over to doing is to be in flow when we're building our foundation or when we're attending to our seed and the potentially growing plant and to get the fruit, rather than needing to see and eat a little bit of the fruit, right? Because as I illustrated, that if I need to see a little bit of fruit and eat it, right, as soon as possible, that may actually take me in exactly the opposite direction as what will actually be effective in growing the plant to get the real fruit that I want, or a lot of fruit. You see? And of course you can see that with the dating illustration, and we can do this we can see this with some things people can do regarding making money. Is people can do things that are actually counterproductive, or certainly feel in ways on top of that that are counterproductive. Is it productive to feel frustrated? Is it productive to feel angry at people that aren't doing what you want, that might be your partners or might be potential partners or clients, or frustrated with them? That's not productive, right? Is it productive to act like a person who's dating ineffectively when you're talking to clients? No, right? Now, Cotton's given you a model for not acting that way, and that's great. And when I say that's great, that is great, full stop, super great. This is why we're so grateful to Cotton and why I'm so grateful to Cotton. Is he figured out a model that he just gives you, and you just take the model. You don't need to know what I'm teaching you here if you just follow this model, and it works great. And models like that are super, and I like to give those to you too, and I like to have those in the business that I create for you. I love to just give you stuff that you can immediately use. That's a model. But the reason I'm doing Alchemy is because, first of all, I haven't described driving out of San Francisco. Who wants me to, despite the fact that we're going on, who wants me to describe driving out of San Francisco, even though you have no idea what it is? I'll only do this time. Maybe once or twice in the future. Driving, you want it? Sorry, you guys probably have to click over. All right, forget it. All right, I'll describe it. Forget the feedback. If I go too long, you can always watch the replay. But let's check anyway. Oh, look at that. Ooh, okay, excellent. All right. Okay, real quick, very simple. Suppose you don't really recognize, you don't really know exactly how to get to San Francisco. Anyway, let's just keep this very simple. If you drive around randomly throughout the United States and you don't know how to get to San Francisco, you don't know how to exactly recognize it when you see it, then you might get there. All right, or someone could just even send you there. But if you don't know how to really recognize it, and you might keep driving. You might get there, but you don't know you're there. You keep driving. You might drive back out of it. So if someone gives you a model that works, but you don't understand why it's working, you can easily just meander out of that model and not use it, or you might use it sometimes and actually not use it other times. So that's all driving to San Francisco means, but it's another great go-to illustration that comes up a lot. It's because we're so often satisfied with instructions that work. And this happens all the time with people trying to copy conversion templates and conversion stuff that seems to work somewhere else. If they don't really understand what the ingredients of conversion are, and I'll plan on getting that as well at some point in Alchemy, not in this webinar. I've touched on it in the past, but I'll hit it new here. So again, you can have ingredients, you can have success, and normally people just want to believe it's them, and that when they want their self-image, right? When you have a goal to feel good about yourself, then what you'll do is you'll say, "Aha! I got this success because I'm so great. I got it, right? I got it." And then, but they don't really understand the ingredients. They don't use alchemy. I don't just mean my course, but the concept, right? They don't use conceptual alchemy and break it down. And it's even, you can see this in our culture, when people have success, do people want to talk about it with other people much and really delve into it? Not often, right? Usually if you have a friend and you just start talking about your success and try to break it down and look at it closely and turn it from every angle, then other people in your life aren't really they're going to think, oh, why do you have to keep talking about that? Why talk about your success? Well, as if you're like, the assumption will be that you're just bragging or patting yourself on the back or something like that, because people have this whole self-image goal thing but then it creates this vicious cycle where we don't really figure out why ingredients work. People assume that you're just trying to talk about why you're so great, but it's the opposite. If you're trying to figure out how you achieved a success, then you're trying to figure out the method, which is not you, because you want your success to be based on a method, not just that you emanate greatness and you just sit there and emanate conversion or emanate smarts, right? I get things right by using a method on them each and every time, not by just emanating intelligence or whatever. So you want to understand things and what they're made of, conceptually or otherwise, and why things work and so forth, why Cotton's model works. And part of what I'm showing you here is part of that. Where he gives you a model with the velvet ropes where you don't act like a needy guy trying to date and get a woman, you see? And then by understanding this, then you can apply what he's showing you even better. And you can also not accidentally drive out of San Francisco, now I can use that term, and we have some idea what I'm talking about. And the more I refer to that term, the more it'll fill itself in for you and so forth. The drive out of San Francisco idea. Okay, so back to the need for feedback, and whoops, this slide here. So listen, if you're doing things in a cool way, so now when I talk about I play to win or I'm here to win, it doesn't just mean I really get my emotions involved and I feel twice as emotional and twice as frustrated and twice as angry and just bull my way through. Instead, it means I'm looking to actually make a plan originally. When I originally set my goal, I want to actually make it feedback proof. And what I want to understand is how do I water the seed and grow the seed in various ways, get it the right sunlight, have it originally planted in the right latitude, or not try to plant that seed if the plant's not going to grow there, That's not being negative, right? Is it negative to not plan a plan? Now you might try. Maybe conventional wisdom says it won't grow, but you try anyway. But then you're doing it to learn, to understand. That's fine. But when you're there to win, if your goal is going to be able to shift itself and twist for these sub-goals that end up being goals for feedback, that, as I've illustrated, can actually take you in the opposite direction, make you act like a needy drug addict or something like that, who's acting in a counterproductive manner, then you're not there to win, right? You don't know if you're going to win. And you need that feedback crack that actually can be counterproductive on top of everything. And that's no good. So if I'm going to win, if I'm there to win, then I make a goal and then a plan along with it where I'm going to win. And I'll set it in a way where I'm going to succeed. Or if it's just a sub-temporary goal, I stipulate things. I set kind of a situation and boundaries. So let's say I want to rank a website. Then I get a sense of how important it is and what resources I'm interested in spending, top max. And then I focus on things that I know can help. And it's not about checking the ranking, right? And if I reach the total amount of resource I don't want to spend anymore, then I'm done, right? For example, if I was dating, I'm happily married, but if I was dating, then just to use an illustration, then I would be focused on growing the idea of I would want to better understand and have a more clear vision of what a happy, secure, whatever word you want, relationship would be like, and I would be focused on that vision. And when I'm on a date, I'm generally looking to focus it on that vision and see what and listen to the other person's vision, get a sense of what their vision would be, and help them create their vision for what a beautiful relationship would look like. I once said that on a kind of a panel conference call with a person who had like a relationship product, and they were surprised. They said, like, what would you talk about on a first date? And people gave other stuff, but I talked about, well, I would be interested in the woman's vision for what a great relationship looks like. And I did that in actual practice, and I'm happily married, so at least it worked once, right? But seriously, what does that do? Now you are attending to foundations, and the feedback. Now instead of feedback, you're growing your understanding. If you've heard me or Mike Long talk about the understanding line, it's a model to help. But now I'm giving you the ingredients better, more granularly. But with the understanding line, which is the idea that, and I talked about this in my success framework videos, which should be available to everyone, I think, on this webinar in your members area. And I talked about you want to always be growing your understanding and have that be how you know you're making progress. And I was giving a model that I'm now describing even better how it works and why it works so importantly, how critical it is. Because if you're growing your understanding, you're attending to the foundation, but you're not doing all the problems that come along with feedback. Now you're in flow, making real progress in a way that is really going to build toward the goal that you want, and your goal is stipulated so that if you need to drop the goal, you drop it, right? And again, some goals are inherently permanent because they're good and true, and you're never going to, you can understand them, and they're never going to be shown to be wrong because they're correct. And then others are just provisional. They're just temporary based on the conditions on the ground, and maybe if the conditions change, they change. Now, by the way, there's certain things like if you make a contract with somebody, then there's an inherent thing there where part of what you would have as a kind of a foundational goal is to keep your word, right? So just because you don't feel like keeping your word anymore, people very often because of goals, their mind will try to make them believe that they don't have to fill that contract anymore. But make sure you're right about that. And generally, the burden of proof should be on a damn good reason why you don't keep your word or your contract. Best thing is to be careful about giving it and be careful about your offer and so forth. But so I'm not talking about, just ditch anyone and break your word just because there's new conditions. All right, I'm talking about goals, goals that have a reason to be changed. If there's obviously if the conditions didn't change where you have a contract with someone, then you want to fulfill your contract. But even within that, you can only fulfill it to the extent of what you can control. So even if you're trying to fulfill a contract that's difficult, you still do it best in the same way, right? You're tending and focusing on to what you can control, and that's the best you can do. Doing your best literally does mean maximum focus and resources that are available or that you've allocated to attending to the foundation, watering the plant, however you put it. Focusing on what you can know and growing that. Remember, when you focus on what you can know, that will expand. So you'll expand your control. When you seek to understand, you'll have more control. If you seek to control the whole thing, you'll accidentally end up shrinking your understanding and shrinking your control. So focus on understanding, you'll have more control. Focus on control. In practice, you'll end up having less power, less control. So people tie, to sum up here, or to kind of tie thing, or finish up, people tie one hand behind their back to make themselves feel better, like a drug. So what I mean is, they'll set they'll by accident have conditions be put in their brain where, like this guy, right, on dating, or if you're trying to make money but you need feedback, you need to eat some of the fruit as soon as possible, then you're actually making it so much harder for you to achieve your goal, right? If you need a woman to sleep with you right away on the first date, then you're actually making it harder for yourself to, it could be the case that the person with whom you build a relationship of your dreams sleeps with you on the first date. I'm not saying it won't. But if you need that as a prerequisite, you logically have made it harder for yourself, do you see? So I'm not saying you couldn't possibly get there on that route. I'm not saying it's wrong to sleep on the first date or not. I'm not talking about that one way or the other. But logically speaking, if you put extra conditions that you're trying to achieve in addition to your goal, that's what I mean by tying one hand behind your back, then now you have to achieve two things. You have to achieve the person sleeping with you on the first date, plus get the relationship that you want, right? And to the extent that one is counterproductive for the other, now it makes things harder. So it'll feel like you're on the right track, but again, so that's how people tie their hands behind their back. If I'm here to win, do I tie my hands behind my back before I start? No, right? You set things up properly so that you're feedback proof. I'm going to succeed ultimately with getting these ideas out for people. I'm going to allocate pretty much maximum resources or continue to allocate a lot of resources consistently in my life and really base everything, in essence, around this, prioritize based around this. I keep some balance in my life, but even that balance kind of serves my ability to continually devote resources towards discovering, communicating, law of implication, alchemy, that God exists, and so forth. I've set myself up to win, right? It's not about feedback. It's not about alchemy succeeding. It's not about making a lot of sales of alchemy when I go to sell it to people that don't have it included, which are people that have this included are people that are in Director's Cut program and anyone that has live webinars, which is, anyhow, Assimilation and Director's Cut, 2016. But if it became about making sales, as if that's like a sub-goal, well, now I'm tying one hand behind my back and ultimately making it work. Perfectly fine if I'm trying to build a relationship of my dreams with a woman and she seems like great and she wants to sleep with me and I want to sleep with her on the first date, great. But I don't have to, but that doesn't have anything to do with me feeling like I'm closer. If I make a bazillion sales of alchemy, or if everyone on this webinar tells me that they got it, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm closer to my final goal. I certainly appreciate when that happens. So all the feedback that's nice you can appreciate, but I don't have a goal for it specifically, if that makes sense, in a counterproductive way. Any actual progress I will appreciate. Or even the appearance of progress, I can appreciate it, right? But I don't want to take it in the wrong way. And so my real progress has to do with anything foundational, right? Me understanding better, me practicing to help myself understand and practice speaking, getting feedback from people that helps me to ask the right questions, or when I am on the right track and you let me know, then that's super helpful, right? Plus, if you let me know in a public way so that it helps other people get involved, then that helps me on my goal too, and I appreciate that for that reason. But still, none of it is what I'm going for instead of going for my goal. I stay focused on the thing I want, and I stay focused by, again, not letting my brain make sub-goals for feedback that's allegedly on the way. If it's something that's clearly increased my understanding, then that's definite progress, and I can feel excited about that. But I also make sure that I apply method to something that I think is understanding, and I don't let it just be this triangulation crack where my brain says, yeah, you got it, you understand it. Your brain will give you that crack, that dopamine, when it fits, when it's triangulated, regardless whether it's foundational. So the only way you can know something and understand it is to mix consciousness with it. Like the liquid, right, with the dehydrated milk, and I need to check it properly to see if it's understanding, and not just feel the crack from my brain. I can enjoy the crack, but not be living my life based on it like a drug addict. The way people in practice are like drug addicts with their brain to some extent, including you and me, and then we want to dissolve that. And to some extent, helping people with alchemy is a little bit like helping drug addicts. Wonderful, only mildly, slightly addicted drug addicts, and I'm including myself. But it can be hard, right, at first. And a drug addict has no idea that it's going to really help them. They feel like it, is to help them get off drugs in a lot of cases. Okay, that will do it for now, except for some little discussion and feedback. But none of these things are going to get dropped that we're talking about originally. They're going to be mixed and in the future and talked about and visited and so forth. But I have to do a certain amount on each webinar and then continue. Are we driving there in a Tesla? Excellent. Do a little refresh just in case. Although I saw 1 minute there, so it didn't look too frozen. I'm working in a totally new world now. Excellent. Excellent. I remember when I referenced that. False identity, not knowing what you are, yields false solutions and ambitions. Without a proper zero, the rest of the number line will not be understood. It is all relevant to zero. Awesome, Chris. Excellent. Thank you, David. Another brilliant stack on a dense concept. I have not seen this material presented in a way this close to the what is. It is illuminating. Thank you. Thank you. Excellent way of putting it. And great. And your feedback here and what you post is in OMG way also. It'll definitely be helpful for others. And it'll help me share, which is super. So I appreciate it, and it has a real effect. So 10 million in debt, that's awesome. If anyone does think that I've hit the 10 million mark in that way of defining it, where you'd advise someone if there's the only possible way to go make the 10 million. I won't ever charge that much, of course, or anything like that. And I like to charge as little as possible, but still having people take it seriously. And having some kind of business model just seems to, at least for now, work better. Because then I can even release stuff for free in addition to it that I want people to get. Certainly showing people how to know that God exists. I'll release things like that for free, or at least a version of it. But there's something about having a product along with it that kind of gives it a whole different level of seriousness and helps affiliates promote it and everything like that. But I kind of made sure that I didn't need to do it for the money, so that wouldn't influence me too strongly and to make wrong decisions or biased decisions about things, or to even be afraid to say what I needed to say. I'm curious your view on mental illness. Interesting. I'll consider that one. How do we know it's true? I'll deal with that specifically in at least one, if not multiple, webinars. But I've referred to it here and there, and I'm constantly illustrating it. I like your view as relates to nuance of goal setting, namely, what is the goal serving? Yeah, excellent. Yeah, that's this slide here. It contains the ingredients. Of course, you have to mix it with your mind and understand it and work on it and build from it. But really what I'm pointing to here is nuts, just totally nuts. And took me so long to figure this out. I've been working on trying to figure out goals. I've gotten better and better models over time, but this is the first time I've ever put it this way. So I figured out how to put it this way recently. I've generally mostly understood this myself, but I didn't. I would drive it to San Francisco myself, get the berries mixed together, and I wouldn't be able to explain it as well as now. And it doesn't mean I won't even explain it better in the future, but this is really getting granular. really getting to pretty close to the heart of it, or maybe all the way to the heart of it. It's pretty fundamental concepts here that I'm dealing with, so you can't break some of these down too much more, but I'll be looking at it. But this is a big deal for yourself. The feedback talk is right on the mark, and strangely very timely for me, as I just experienced something similar a few hours ago. Excellent. No, this is a nice, a pretty cool. One of the reasons I was excited about this webinar in particular, as it came together, is that it has that wonderful sweet spot where it's both really deep, so to speak, or foundational. I don't think a foundational is deep. I start at the foundation. You have to start like in the middle of things, hanging in the middle of the air, in order to feel like the foundation's deep, right? So to me, it feels like real close and right there at the foundation. That's where I kind of start mentally at this point, right? But one way or the other, it's foundational, which can be difficult if people aren't starting there, which they're generally not, right, conceptually. But it also has this sense where it's really can be almost like practical immediately and used right off the bat, at least the way that it occurred to me to share it. Often it doesn't occur to me. I'm trying to think, how do I show how to apply this right away? I just can't come up with a way in time. But this time I managed to, as far as I at least managed to do it closer than usual. So glad you're doing this for us, yeah. Thank you, Shirley, very much. Thank you, that was profound. What is goal serving exactly? That's what got me to go to the slide. Would it be good practice to treat feeling bad about something as a feeling of pain? Yes, as you said, exactly. Guess I got to a few comments that I might have even looked at before. So much to think about and apply, especially useful to know that old goals can be modified or dispensed with. That opens up so much possibility. Absolutely, oh my goodness. People just have all these goals acting like these unhelpful magnets or pulling stuff in their brains, and it's just causes so much inefficiency and frustration and basically bad feelings plus less resources, you know. It wastes your resource. It's wasteful. It hurts you now, plus it gives you less resources for later and interferes. So as you declutter your mind by being able to let go now better of these previous goals, it's going to be really nice for you. You know, I told you early on that when there's just on a practical general level, which isn't perfect, but the things I interact with these days really tend to turn to gold. And this, you know, you're starting to see why. It's method-based and understanding-based. These ingredients really work, is my point. It's not about me emanating greatness. It's just that these methods and these understandings, these building blocks and so forth, are really true and effective. Yeah, make sure, just stare at that slide and think about it, where is this goal serving goodness? Is it leading to me experiencing goodness? There's a couple of ways to look at that. When you do ask that question, sometimes you just don't know the answer as easily, but at least even the approximate sense you'll get from just asking, is this goal currently make sense to have? Do I want this actively tugging? Do I want my brain, which is a machine that is at any one moment, it's limited in its resources, right? You have a number of different resources, right? Money, your brain's processing, your conscious focus. All of those at any moment are limited. And so you can also ask if it's a priority. Would I rather my brain be working on something else? I don't really like goals on by default very often, and they just get there and they kind of become invisible and just kind of sit there nagging at my brain. If I want it later, I can just set it, like focus on it later. I kind of want my brain to be as still as possible by default. Think on that. So by default, I don't want a goal. The burden is on the goal to be helping me right now in a clear way. Otherwise, I want it dropped, at least for now. I can always pick it back up. I can pick it back up for an hour tomorrow if I want to work on it for an hour tomorrow. But remember I told you I had this calm confidence, generally speaking? Disasters can hit me. I'm not bulletproof. I'm not perfect currently, and maybe never. I don't know exactly how it all works. But with that, but I very consistently have a calm confidence, and I very consistently can tend to get back to it, even if things can happen. But that doesn't mean that I won't be miserable for a week if something I haven't really planned for that's in my brain, you know, from way back or whenever is sitting there. So, you know, I like to have some degree of humility. My context, my life is kind of easy to be happy, although not perfectly easy, not all perfect at all, but still. Great expectations, it's not being negative, but negativity happened because of the expectation. Yeah, you know what? Maybe, I don't know if I'll do it next time. It might be, I also want to get to a marketing plan thing, but I need to delve into that myself. So the idea of applying this, the idea of expectations might be something that I'll pick up presumably soon. It's a good one. I'll make a note of that. Let me just make a note right now. It could be figured out, in essence, like you could maybe work on it too based on what I've talked about, but I might as well deal with that concept specifically as well. And it'll only help reinforce and give more angles and help us to delve into what I've already talked about. So it's kind of a great angle to look at things. Thanks. I really needed to hear these things. Very helpful. I'm looking at things a different way already. Wonderful, Alicia. That's so super. So glad to see. Obviously, it's nice to see. Surface of overt progress being made. Hi, David. Thanks. Just a thought came to mind. Would you say employees have the wrong mindset or pursuing the wrong goals? In some ways, I think being an employee is almost too good to be true. Seems great, potentially. You show up and get a paycheck and have to, hit some minimum or whatever. But seriously, I don't know that it's inherently wrong at all to be an employee. If it's incompatible with other goals, you want to get those sorted out and figure out which one you want and which one you don't want, right? But perhaps one could just be an employee and not really worry about the money thing in some sense. But if you are an employee and you're not getting out of it, then if it's not serving your overall kind of sense of life purpose, then maybe you're fooling yourself in a bad way. Maybe you want to get that taken care of. People say money's not important, and some people, if someone has a job, and then when someone has a job, it's not they just work at their job, but it often affects what they can, do with other people and so forth. So you can't say money's not important and then work at a job, right? So you have to treat money like it's pretty important until and unless you get it taken care of. I want to talk about at some point soon also about thresholds versus a continuum, and that's going to actually relate to this. Let me make another note of that. That's going to end up being one of those awesome, cool distinctions when I do talk about that. Your brain by default kind of extrapolates and makes things as if it's like inherently continuous in a way that's often a real problem, because often things don't work that way. Thank you, David Mills, for this. The number one thing that I focus on every single day is mindset. The way it helped me shift my mindset is truly a foundation. That's wonderful. I'm so glad. Proof's in the pudding. Excellent. I like to think of mindset as one of the ingredients that gets mixed into to whether we accomplish our goals and to our experience. And so exactly, it gets built. It's one of the things that gets built off of our foundation. That's why I don't think of law of implication, alchemy, my stuff as inherently mindset. I think of mindset more like an ingredient or a model, and that's part of what I'm helping you get, which is compatible with what you're saying, and just let me elaborate on that. But I don't think of what I have to show as within just the box of mindset. Thank you. You're very welcome, Alicia. Really helpful presentation is getting this goal thing. Exactly. There's a number of different angles on the very heart of things, but understanding goals is so close to the foundation, right, of life. Once you get the idea of consciousness field and goodness and things like that, who you are, then your mind is obviously a big deal, right? A few big deals are like getting a sense of God and that God exists and then the basic nature of God. But then your mind and understanding it, obviously your mind is mixed with your experience all the time, right? The things that are consistently mixed with your consciousness field are obviously the most important things. Important means that which has the most impact on your goodness and your badness, and more goodness, more badness, that sort of thing, right? So most impact gets mixed and has, a lot. Your mind is obviously there all the time, mixing with your not just your mindset, but everything about your mind, your model of the world, your beliefs, at all, your whole mental constructs in your mind, and so forth. So obviously understanding your mind is critical, and goals are at the foundation of understanding your mind. So they're unbelievably critical. And the more you understand goals, the more you're clearly growing the fruit of good stuff in your life, right? You're tending to understanding of goals is certainly a great thing to tend to. Obviously, I'll wind down here in just a few moments, but let me not skip past Andrew. Oh, here. Thomas. David, I feel I have built my relationship with my fiance in the way that you're describing and you're verbalizing. It's blowing my mind to have this now, to have knowing what I've been doing. It's making it so clear. That's wonderful, Thomas. I want to ask if you mean you screwed it up or whether you did it right. But either way, excellent. That is showing you what you're doing so you don't have to drive out of San Francisco and so forth. Given that it's your fiance, presumably did it mostly right. I probably have more goals than I'm even aware of. How to recognize thoughts and items on my to-do list are actually goals. Well, you can, anytime you feel like you want something, like you want someone to do something, or you want to do something, then there's a goal at the heart of it. And it might be one of those sub-bite-sized goals about getting feedback. Again, generally your mind has shifted your goals to goals for what it thinks is going to be feedback and progress towards the goal. So you have all those little bite-sized feedback goals that are counterproductive in your mind. And that's a lot of what we're talking about here. And you can start to dissolve those. And I'll keep working at this. I'll working at how to demonstrate this more, give more examples. And I'll also be like applying this during Alchemy webinars. I'll be applying this to, our money getting and our OMG endeavors in a way that can, it'll be examples of the foundations that I'm talking about while also, giving you actual models and things. Good things, yep. I figured. You're quite welcome. Breaking glass ceilings, crushing beliefs that do not serve, exactly. Okay, wonderful, guys. Thank you once again for a terrific webinar. As we're done here, even after, if you want to post things that, you can also, even if you wouldn't mind, or if you would like to help, you can post a separate post as well, right here in OMG Way, encouraging people to watch this replay or saying it was great or saying, it's worth so much or whatever, to the extent that you want to help myself and other people. Or you can do it in future weeks or whatever, but we'll begin kind of going more public with this fairly soon. Oh, that's wonderful. Yep, alchemy in full effect. All right, guys. All right, I'll end the recording here, and I'll keep the webinar on for a second. Thank you, Megan, so much, and thank you, Chris. Well, that's cool, Mike. It's good for them to see that, and then they can, no problem posting in team and assimilation, getting people in there to be to watch the replay and so forth, right? We have a couple hundred people on, but that means there's plenty of hundreds of people that couldn't be on, either couldn't be or won't know to watch this. But this, yeah, Mike could use it as he helps me to market this. Mike's fired up about getting people into alchemy. It's fun because this stuff is abundant, It's not, there's, however many people get this stuff, it just helps the world. So, with specific career paths or ways of making money at some point, you don't want to you can't have millions of people doing the same thing. But with alchemy, it's very abundant, which is very, very nice to be doing that. Okay, I'll stop the recording here at least.